large scale death and its consequences. We saw that if a violent or unnatural death happens, then the being hangs around and this in turn impacts the place. Now, in case of wars, where a lot of people are killed violently, are there any negative consequences in that place? This has to be looked at in two parts. If you look at the ancient wars, they were fought with swords and spears with men running full speed into each other. I don't think there is much fear in such a situation. Death and destruction happened rather quickly. This is often true even with modern warfare. In that sense, there is not much of a residue of this kind. It is only if you give them an opportunity for fear. If they were cornered or something, then they were terrorized. But this did not happen on such a large scale in ancient wars. However, if you take World War I or even World War II, most of it was fought in the trenches. Those trenches were terrible places of fear. People were cold and hungry. Their fingers and toes were eaten up by frostbite, pain, and all that. Their fear was because they were sitting there waiting to die. Instead, if you went out with your rifle screaming, then either you died or the enemy died. This would be a different thing. This is like a car accident. If you are driving full speed and suddenly boom, either they die or you die. But when they were sitting and waiting in those trenches, only a small percentage of men would not have much fear. These were people who had a larger vision that they were doing this for their country and all that. However, there were many others who did not have such a sense of sacrifice but just became pawns in the game of war. They would have wondered why the hell were they born in this country, because they were now in the trenches and may get killed at any moment. Such people would have been in extreme fear. Whether they died or not, that fear would have left behind an enormous negative force. I think Europe has seen that kind of long-term fear and suffering more than any other land on the planet. So many lives falling apart will have an impact anywhere. But when people die of fear on a large scale, very morbid manifestations may happen. It can be psychological and mixed up with what people go through in terms of life or energetic turmoil. Most of all, one thing that will happen is that they will not know joy, they will not know love. These two things will become difficult when all these things happen around you. They may know passion, they may know sexuality, they may know pleasures, but they cannot know the simple joy and simple bond of loving someone. So complicated expressions of the simple human traits of wanting to be joyful or loving will manifest. Something like this is said in the Mahabharata after Kurukshetra. The Kurukshetra war was a terrible war. It is said that more than 1 lakh people died in the war. For the population of those days, 100,000 people is a huge number to die. That too just by swords and arrows. If you have to kill 100,000 people with no bombs, no gunpowder, just with swords and arrows, then the amount of fighting that happened must have been enormous. The strange thing is that we know so much about war and there are detailed accounts of every little things that happened there. After the war, the Pandavas ruled the kingdom for 36 years, but we don't hear a single word about it. In the entire story, the real story should have been after the war, because that is why they fought the war, to decide who should rule and how. But not a word is heard about it because nothing significant happened in their lives. They did not live a joyful life, they simply lived and ruled. They must have done something for the kingdom, expanded perhaps, but nothing significant. Nothing significant happened in the human experience because there was certain bareness in their life. This would not be just for those five people and their family, but for the entire population as well. This was not because they were affected psychologically from having lost someone. Yes, that impact would also have been there, but above all, it was just the effect of the gore of death all around. Today, they say because the place was so soaked in blood, it is good to die in Kurukshetra. People go there to die because they believe it is a good place to die. Maybe someone made this up, or maybe it is good. I don't know. But at that time, definitely the next few generations after that would have their gore of death in their samskar. So they could never have really known the joy of bonding with people, nor the simple joy of living. They would have slogged, they would have built, and they would have done things here and there. They would have laughed, they would have lived, they would know everything, but there would have been no real sense of joy. This, I feel, is the case with European nations, except in the southern part. So, can this be undone? Yes, it can. Creating many consecrated spaces would be one way of doing it. If you create really powerful consecrated spaces that are strategically located, it could definitely undo a lot. But there is nothing like Jnanam, Dhyanam, Anandam. Jnanam is awareness about the truth, Dhyanam is meditativeness, Anandam is blissfulness, which is a consequence of the two. Really, these things are not simply slogans, they can change the world.